Hello, everyone. My name is Amir Hassan El. I am the Wazir of Elodium Moorish Peridium of New Mecca, an internal state of the Empire of Morocco. I have with me today my very first guest is Chief Judge Jay Bey uh, of the Empire of Morocco, Supreme Court Judge, and the Consular Court Judge. I brought him on because I wanted for the public and the people to get to know Judge Jay Bey and to learn more about him and for general conversation. This is our first meeting, so I do have some questions for you, Chief. I want to know, how does the empire and statehood benefit Black people?
Well, that's a good question, good brother. And I thank you for having me on here this evening. This will be my first podcast,
Right.
Especially on behalf of the Empire of Morocco. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak to the people.
Yes.
So the question is, it's generated towards Black people, right? So as we all know, people are very comfortable calling themselves Black because that's what we all called ourselves as children. Our parents told us that, et cetera. And so for communication purposes, right, we'll use the word Black, even though Black is not a nationality. We all know that's an adjective. Our true nationality is Moroccan.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, I wanted the opportunity to speak directly to the people because we're all one people, regardless of what name we call ourselves. At the end of the day, we have a common denominator, which is we've all been colonized, right? And, to have an opportunity to speak directly to the people about, what do we do to get out of that condition? And, it's very important that our people as a community, and I'll refer to our community as the copper-colored people, mm-hmm. right? Because people are familiar with saying crayon names and et cetera. So I'll say the copper-colored people. As just a general term. But, the copper-colored people have been absolutely miseducated. And, through AMPAC Study Session, which is the YouTube channel commonly known as AMPAC Media, I've tried my best to try to reach out to a broad audience of people call themselves Black, people call themselves Moorish Americans, people call themselves Indians, et cetera. Right. So when it comes to the quote unquote Black community, there's a lot of information that they have not been taught. And, I'm trying to do my best to help them to deplete their learning curve as quickly as possible, because the only way for us to get out of this subjugation status is to start to understand law. So law is the most important thing that all of us need to understand at the end of the day. If you don't understand law, if you don't understand nationality, if you don't understand that it's the state that has all the power that governs over people, then obviously we're going to continue to be a subjugated people. So I'm here to do my best to use, my pen to put an end to colonists and obstructionists in Morocco. So that's pretty much how I'd like to open up with that initial question.
Okay. So the question was, how does statehood benefit Black people? What type of thing?
Yeah, well, statehood, everybody is governed by a state. No matter where you go on planet Earth, a state is governing over all the people. They commonly refer to it as the republic. Statehood will benefit Black people because Black people are trying to get out of the jurisdiction of the United States. Black people refer to it as, I'm trying to get away from the white man, right? Mm-hmm. How do I get the white man to respect me? Well, the reality is the only way you can get respect as a people is to be referred to by your nationality name. Black people will never get respect because there's no such thing as Black as a nationality. So the state needs to recognize your nationality and put you on the protections of the state. Black people have to understand they're not Black, they're actually Moroccans. So the state is a Moroccan state that puts Moroccans under the protections of the state. So Black people have to pledge allegiance to a state that will provide them protections away from disgruntled white people of the United States, right? Now, when I use that terminology, white people, I'm not trying to say white people are bad people or it's white people's fault. I'm only using that term for communication purposes because you asked a question about Black people.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of Black people are trying to get out of that jurisdiction. Well, the reality is that you have to pledge allegiance back to your Aboriginal state, which is called the Empire of Morocco. A lot of Black people don't realize that they're actually Moroccans. But once they pledge allegiance to the Empire of Morocco, which is the state, they can come under the protections of the state, which means they get out of the jurisdiction of the United States, the several union states, and their local municipalities. However, there's a trade-off. Black people have to understand that no matter where you go on planet Earth, a state will govern you. So you go from the United States jurisdiction, and then you come under the protections, under the umbrella of the Empire of Morocco. But that means you have to abide by Moroccan laws as well, or there'll be anarchy, right? So we have Moroccan laws in the Empire of Morocco for people to abide by. So Black people have to understand when you come back and pledge your allegiance to the state of the Empire of Morocco, we all have to work in harmony with each other to respect the laws of the empire, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, we have to learn how to harmonize with the United States of America because we're all sharing the same landmass. And that's my answer for Black people. They want to use the power of the state for their protections.
Mm-hmm.
That's my answer.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so with the United States and Morocco sharing the same landmass, is that similar to a two-party state? Like they're trying to do in Israel? They wanted the Palestinians to have a state, and they wanted the Israelis to have a state and on the same landmass. And they wanted them to coincide together. Is that similar to what we're having here in the United States and in Morocco? Or is it something different? Is it jurisdiction?
No, it's something totally different.
Okay.
Yeah, that scenario in what's commonly known as the Middle East is totally different from what's happening in the Empire of Morocco. The Empire of Morocco consists of several continents, right? It expands over the continent that's commonly known as America, but it's not America, it's actually Morocco.
Okay.
It expands over into what's commonly known as Europe, but it's actually Morocco. And it also expands into Africa, et cetera. It's all Morocco. This is by treaty. Treaties recognize these land masses as being Morocco, right? Okay. However, when it comes to Moors are all over planet Earth. But if we narrow it down, the Moors, commonly known as Moroccans, are sharing the same landmass with the other European states. So therefore, what we have to understand, this is called jurisdiction. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
If you look at the Cherokee Indians in what's commonly known as Oklahoma, the Cherokee Indians on their reservation are sharing the same landmass with the United States citizens of the state of Oklahoma. Right. They're all residing on the same landmass and they're intermixing all the time. So, but what happens is when it's called jurisdiction, as soon as you say your nationality, if you say your nationality is Cherokee, automatically you come under Cherokee's laws and jurisdiction. If you say you're a citizen of the United States of America, i.e. an American, now you come under the laws of Oklahoma and the United States. But yet both the Cherokees and the Americans are intermixing. And you know who else is intermixing with them? Moors, Moroccans, and they don't even know it, right? So to answer your question, it's not a two-state solution. It's several states all sharing the same landmass. What makes the distinction is your nationality.
Okay.
Right. So there's no border that separates the United States of America from Moroccans. No, we're sharing the same landmass.
So we're sharing the same landmass, but under different jurisdiction.
That's correct.
Okay, based off of your ID or your nationality. So if a Cherokee driving down the road and a police from the state of Oklahoma pulls him over, then now we got a jurisdiction issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the Cherokee falls under the laws of the Cherokee Nation. And therefore the policeman doesn't have jurisdiction over him. And therefore the policeman just continues on, give him a warning or whatever. That's not.
Yeah, that's correct. The Cherokee as an example, right? Because we're trying to get an understanding, how does it work when you're sharing the same landmass? Well, as soon as you present identification that says you're Cherokee national, then that foreign police officer doesn't have jurisdiction in the matter of dealing with that Cherokee national, right? And vice versa. The Cherokee police do not have jurisdiction over American citizens, but yet they're sharing the same landmass. However, when there is a dispute, what happens? Well, they have to invoke what's commonly known as treaties. The treaties tell them how both parties can settle disputes. They have to go to a special court. When you're dealing with Indians, right, when people call themselves Cherokee, they've stated on the record with their treaties that they recognize United States courts as the proper venue to settle disputes between Cherokee nationals and American nationals. When it comes to Moroccans, like us, people used to call themselves Black, not finding out they're Moroccans. Well, what happens when Moroccans have a dispute with Cherokee people, or what happens when Moroccans have a dispute with Americans? Well, the reality is we must use consular court to settle those disputes. Consular court is a Moroccan court. It's not an American court. It's not a Cherokee court. It's a Moroccan court, right? And it operates as a means to settle disputes peacefully. But it is a Moroccan court nonetheless.
Okay. So therefore, they're under the laws of Morocco, and they follow those laws and no other laws, correct? The consular court.
Yeah, consular court is a Moroccan venue.
Okay.
And according to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787 and 1836 as a bilateral treaty, it states in Articles 20 and 21, which are both civil and criminal provisions in the treaty. Articles 20 and 21 states that any dispute between Moors and American citizens have to be settled in consular court.
Okay. So consular court follows international laws and Moroccan laws, correct?
That's correct. The first jurisdiction is Moroccan law. It's not necessarily international law.
Okay.
Consular court is between only the parties that have signatory powers to the treaty. So therefore, we have treaties amongst Moroccans. The Empire of Morocco and its nationals are referred to as Moroccans, have treaties with the United States of America, bilateral treaty of peace and friendship of 1787 and 1836. But also the Moroccan government, right, and Empire of Morocco also has multilateral treaties with several other European states. And the Moroccan government and the other European states have agreed that in any dispute, they would settle all disputes, both civil and criminal, in the consular court venue.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So tell me this then. The empire is now active, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So now, with the empire being active, how will other states, such as the United States or France or the Christian powers, how do you think that they're going to react to this new government? What are some speculating? Can you speculate on that?
Well, it's hard to speculate on it. What I can say is this. Everything starts with the rule of law.
Okay.
Both parties have something in common, which is referred to as the treaties itself. The treaties already set up certain arrangements between the Empire of Morocco and the several European states, such as the United States of America, Great Britain, Germany, France, Spain, Ireland, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Italy, etc. You always start with the treaties because the treaties already set forth language on how both parties are supposed to respect each other. In addition to the treaties, you can always lean upon the Charter of the United Nations of 1945 that in Articles 1, Section 2, Articles 73 and 74 talks about how do states start to engage with indigenous people. We as Moroccans are the indigenous people. And the Empire of Morocco is an ancient state of indigenous people. So the Charter of the United Nations starts to talk about how do you come together as two separate states, right? Two separate states start to engage in friendly relations. Well, you start with your treaties because the treaties are about friendly relations. You start with the Charter of the United Nations because that's about keeping peace and security. And from there, you start to just simply sit down and seek friendly relations through what's called political reforms. All states are obligated to seek inquiry to settle any type of question peacefully. But the answer is always go back to your treaties. That's where everybody has a common denominator of a starting point.
Okay.
And that's the answer, it's the treaties.
Okay.
So in other words, the Europeans are going to respect the treaties because they became signatory powers to the treaties. And from there, it starts to get into other political negotiations. But everything goes back to the treaties that the Europeans have already agreed to. It's just that Moors, i.e. Moroccans, have to become accustomed to what's called political negotiations and discussions on a world stage. That's something that we're not accustomed to doing. However, you have a lot of people call themselves Black, and they're holding high-ranking positions with the United States government. They already know how to deal with political reforms and political negotiations with other states. They're already doing it. They just don't know how to pitch it from a Moroccan perspective because they've been Americans their whole life and not knowing that they were naturalized and adopted by the United States. Anybody call themselves Black don't realize they used to be Moroccans and they got adopted as Americans, and now they're representing the United States of America, and they have these high-ranking positions on how to deal with political reforms. We just need them to come home and continue to exercise that expertise that they already have.
Right.
However, the Empire of Morocco right now is at a stage where a lot of the Moors who have come into the Moroccan movement do not have that expertise on a world stage. So we need our brothers and sisters to come home to the Empire of Morocco and take office, their proper seat to represent the Empire of Morocco, and stop representing the United States. But trust me, they already have the resume. They already have the experience. We just need them to come home and represent their biological mother state instead of representing their adopted mother state. That's true.
Okay. Okay. Question: when you said the treaties are the very significant, when you have treaties with certain countries and those treaties are no longer active, say like the Treaty of Fez, correct? Now, if they're no longer active, how can the Moors still use those treaties to have their wishes met? And the reason I asked that question, because I'm thinking some of these treaties are rather old, and therefore, since there were no Moroccan government for at least, 60 years or more, and many of these other governments didn't have to answer to the Moroccan government, and there hasn't been a sultan over 60 years. So therefore, when you try to bring the Moroccan government back to life and to impose these treaties, I'm thinking we're going to get pushback. Can you answer that question? The question is, are those old treaties still active?
Oh, when you mention the Treaty of Fez of 1912, that treaty has been dissolved mutually between two parties. And the two parties was, at that time, the Empire of Morocco and France, the Republic of France. So yes, that treaty is absolutely dissolved. I think your question is one of if the Europeans have removed their signatures from other treaties, such as, let's say, the multilateral Treaty of Madrid of 1880, or if the Europeans remove their signature from the Act Algeciras of 1906. Both of these are multilateral treaties that the United States is still a party to, but there are other European states that have removed their signature from the treaties.
Right.
So the question is, okay, well, how do we still enforce these treaties up on states that have removed their signature from the contract? Well, that's a good question. In international law, which has set forth standards, right? It's called the practice of law or the rule of law or the customs of international law. You see, international law has this word called the custom of law. What does custom mean? It means that the written law might not be in place, but the custom is we need to maintain peace and security. That's a custom. So when you take a look at the treaties are expressed. It's an expressed treaty in written form. However, if the Europeans have taken their names off of the treaties, then what happens is, under what's called the customary norms of international law, forces the Europeans to still have to adhere to the treaties if, in fact, the Europeans are doing something to violate or breach the peace and security of international law. If the Europeans are doing something to violate the rights of Moroccans who are trying to enforce Moroccan laws on the Europeans, and the Europeans say, well, we're not parties to those treaties no more. Well, they can say that, but international law protects treaty language even if you've taken your name off the treaty. So Article 38 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties of 1969, Article 38 talks about the customs and the observation of international law. You see, when you start talking about the word custom means that it might not be written down anywhere. But if you're doing something to breach the peace and security of international law between states, then we have to invoke something in its express written form that causes two states to come and harmonize to get back to a peaceful status. Well, what happens is international law, under what's called the customs of international law, right? The customary norms of international law says that the international law says you may invoke the treaties again because the treaties already had express language that created peace and security. So even if Europeans take their name off the treaty can still be invoked again under the umbrella protections of international law. So which means the General Assembly or the International Court of Justice or the Consular Court can bring a European state back to the table and say, no, you're breaching the peace in Morocco, i.e. the Empire of Morocco. And we're going to enforce the language of the treaties on the customary norms of international law, right? So let me give you a difference, an example. The United States of America is still a contracting party to the treaties. So since the treaties are now binding on them because they consented through the treaty, meaning their signature is still on it, right?
Yes.
You don't have to invoke the customary norms of international law in that scenario because the United States is still a signatory power to the treaties. So you don't have to talk about customs. But if the United States of America had taken their names off the treaties, then you can invoke what's commonly known as the customs of international law under Article 38 in the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. You can also invoke Article 38 under the statutes of the International Court of Justice to force the United States to maintain peace and security in Morocco because the treaties already had express language on how to maintain the peace. Okay. So when you're talking contracts have two definitions. The first definition is, are these contracts binding on you on both parties? Have they both signed it? But if one of the parties remove their signature, then customary norms of international law kicks in and says, we're still going to enforce this contract on you anyway, because you took your name off and now you're violating the peace and security in a particular territory, you see? So the word binding and customary norms is two separate legal arguments that you bring to the table. Okay. All right. This is what people got to understand. There's a big difference between binding contracts and customary norms to force a person back into a contract in order to maintain peace and security. Okay. So customary norms. So in the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787, it says in Article 20 that if there's a dispute between the U.S. citizen and a Moor, that consular court has jurisdiction? 100%. Consular court is a separate venue of the Empire of Morocco. Consular court acts as a neutral court. when Moroccan judges sit in consular court, they're not there to represent their nationality. Even though, like me, I sit in the consular court. I'm the chief judge of consular court for the Empire of Morocco. I was appointed by His Majesty, the Sultan of the Empire of Morocco. Okay? But when I sit in consular court, it's not about my nationality anymore. I must be a neutral judge. My job is to take a look at the statutes of the consular court, right, which is the statutes, which are laws of consular court, and take a look at the rules of the consular court. So I have to maintain both the statutes with the law of the court and the rules of the court, right? It binds me to perform my duties according to rules and laws of the court. And in that capacity, I am a neutral judge. I'm not Moroccan. I'm not American. I'm not German. I'm not French. I'm just a neutral judge. However, in order to be qualified to sit in the seat or sit on the bench of consular court, it must be a Moor, i.e. a Moroccan. Okay. All right. So that's what consular court is all about, settling disputes peacefully, right, from a impartial court. And that's why the consular court was established in the first place, because the consular court is not the Supreme Court of the Empire of Morocco. The Supreme Court of the Empire of Morocco is what you call a domestic internal court. Consular court is a totally separate venue, right? So if this is Supreme Court of the Empire of Morocco, then consular court would be up here. It would be in a higher ipso jure court, a compulsory court for two parts. Say this is the United States of America, and this is the Empire of Morocco, two states. Well, consular court would sit right here in the middle, up top. You see, as a separate neutral venue to settle all civil and criminal disputes between both states or between nationals of both of those states.
Okay, question then. Consular court follows Moroccan laws or what laws?
Yes, so consular court is always subject to Moroccan law. Anytime the United States of America as a state or one of the American citizens motion or petition or submit a dispute to consular court, they have to adhere to Moroccan laws as well as international law, because the consular court can invoke international law. Because any laws that the Empire of Morocco has become a party to, such as the Charter of the United Nations, international law, or any Moroccan law, such as all the treaties are based in Moroccan law. So the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787 and 1836, is based in Moroccan law. The Multilateral Treaty of Madrid of 1880 is based in Moroccan law. The Multilateral Treaty of the Act d'Alger is based in Moroccan law. So anytime any parties come to consular court is only using Moroccan law. So let's say the United States of America has a dispute with the Empire of Morocco or a Moroccan. When they get to consular court, guess what? The only thing they can invoke? Only Moroccan law or international law. That's it. They cannot invoke American laws. Their codes and statutes are null and void when it comes to the consular court. And consular court is binding in terms of Moroccan law. It's only about Moroccan law, nothing else. Obviously international law, but international law is it's applicable only to settle disputes between two states, because in the absence of Moroccan law, you can always fall back on international law to settle disputes as well, you see? So in the absence of Moroccan law, international law acts like almost like a safety net to cover any voids that the Empire of Morocco doesn't have in terms of laws on its books, you see?
Okay. Okay. So again, consular court is for the foreigners and Moors when if there's a dispute, but Supreme Court is for Moroccans only. Is that correct?
That's correct. So your Supreme Court, which is an internal court, it's a domestic court. That court can only be motioned and petitioned only by Moroccans. So it's a Moroccan on Moroccan dispute. So it's Moroccan nationals versus Moroccan nationals, or if two Moroccan internal states have a dispute with each other, they can settle it at the Supreme Court, but it's only for Moroccan disputes.
Okay. So when
That's it.
So let me ask you this: when Moors have issues in their own state, do they have? Will they be like a circuit court for, say, non-criminal cases? What is it called when they're
Civil.
civil cases? Will those courts be just in that particular state, or how would that work out? The legal system, is that something you're still working on, or it's already been formed and it hasn't, or it has taken place?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So the internal Moor states, internal Moroccan states that come under the umbrella of the Empire of Morocco mother state, the external state. All right. So you got the Empire of Morocco, right? And then you got all the internal states underneath it. Okay. So the internal states will have their own Supreme Court. The internal states will have their own circuit court, and the internal states will have their own lower courts. All right. That when Moroccans have disputes amongst themselves, they can motion the lower court. If they're not happy or pleased with the ruling, then there's an appeals court for the circuit court. And obviously there'll be a Supreme Court as well. Okay. So yes, internal disputes between Moors will be settled by Moorish courts lawfully. You see? Now, when you start talking about the Empire of Morocco, that's a higher a court, right? So the Empire of Morocco has its own courts. So you got the Supreme Court of Empire of Morocco, because that's a separate jurisdiction. And the Empire of Morocco has a Supreme Court. It will have a circuit court of appeals, and it will have its lower courts. Okay. Your internal states will have its Supreme Court, its circuit court of appeals, and its lower courts. You know, one time I asked some Moors on one of their YouTube channels, I said, what if a sister, a Moorish sister, has a dispute with a Moorish brother? Who is that Moorish sister supposed to report this so-called criminal case to in the event that she got, let's say, assaulted by a fez-wearing Moor? And I kept asking that question over and over again to the host, and none of them could answer the question. I said, if this sister gets assaulted by a fez-wearing Moor, what is the court venue she's supposed to go to and report that Moor? Tell me, what is the name of the office of the police officer or sheriff that's a Moor that she's supposed to report the incident to, and then motion the court for her own relief? And the host and the people who were supporting the host could not answer the question. They literally said, we just take them out in the alley and deal with it. I said, you know what you just admitted? You don't have a government.
Right.
You don't have three branches of government. You don't have no laws, and you have no courts to protect these sisters out here, even from Moors.
Right.
That's what I found out when I started asking questions to other platforms out there. I won't say any names, but it's a well-known platform. I went on there and started asking questions. They couldn't answer the questions. So if Moors can't protect themselves against Moors, then how are we ever supposed to get protections from the people that we commonly call as Europeans? You see, we wasn't thinking to ourselves. We want protections from Europeans, but yet we didn't even have protections from each other.
Right, right.
You see what I'm saying? But now we do. We're establishing courts to be able to hear allegations from a claimant, i.e. a plaintiff. The plaintiff can now, a Moorish plaintiff, Moroccan, can bring their dispute, their grievance to an internal Moorish state. And the defendant will be summoned by that internal Moorish state.
Okay.
So now the Moors will have a means to settle their grievances with each other instead of having to go to the Europeans' courts. However, who can use the courts as the plaintiff? Only Moroccans.
Only Moroccans.
Only Moroccans can use Moroccan courts as the plaintiff. That's very important to understand. If people don't come back and pledge allegiance to the Empire of Morocco, then they can't use our courts for their grievances. That's very important to understand.
So a U.S. citizen has a complaint against a Moroccan, he has to go to the Moroccan court or the consular court, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So if he goes to the consular court, he has to petition and file a complaint or go to the consular general to file a complaint. How did that?
Yes.
That
So
work?
when we start setting up the procedure, because you're talking procedure right now,
Okay.
for Americans to be able to bring their disputes, their grievances versus a Moroccan, then yes, they'll be able to motion the court or plead to the court, the consular court, directly through procedure. We'll work on these things in the future, but you always have to give Americans the right to have a proper venue, a competent venue where they can bring their grievances.
Mm-hmm.
If the aggrieved do not have a right to bring their dispute to a court, then that means you're violating their human right. Everybody has a human right to seek justice in a court. And Moors will always be in a position where even Americans can bring disputes against Moroccans, and Moroccans can bring disputes against Americans, but it can only be done in consular court. And we'll work on those procedures in the near future.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so can you give us a little information about who Jay Bey is? Because see, Jay Bey, to a lot of people, came out of nowhere. 4 years ago, no one ever heard of Jay Bey, and no one was talking about statehood, governments, and things of that nature. Now, around the internet, people are talking about statehood. You know, we have some yays and some nays. You know, we can't do this or we can't do that. And other people saying, yes, this is the way to go. This is what we've been looking for. This is our salvation, having our own government. Tell us how did you get started in this and to where it is now? Because it's really blowing up.
Yeah, well, long story short,
Okay.
because I could be here all night about, how I got to this point. But originally, I'm from Gary, Indiana, under my former Moore subject name, raised in a, bad city. Gary was bad back then when I was living there. And my family got me up out of there after I had quite a few run-ins and, messing around with gangs as a youngster. But eventually in my adult years, I served in the United States Army. From there, I got a job with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, right? I was working in the prison system, almost like a prison guard. I did that for about 15 years. So I was in the Army for 3 years. Then I worked in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for about 15 years, right? Basically as a correction officer. From there, I started to get into residential real estate. So I got a real estate license to sell houses, to help, buyers and sellers, et cetera. And when you go to get your license as a real estate broker, not a real estate agent, but a broker, you have to take additional credit hours of law. And I found that law was very intriguing to me, even when I took the class to become a broker versus an agent. I had a higher status as a broker. And what that means, brokers have a right to fill in certain contracts. They could perform certain small levels of law, right? As long as they stay within the contract of fill in the blank areas, right? Anyway, from a real estate agent, or i.e. broker, I went into commercial real estate, which dealt with more high-end contracts. You started dealing with attorneys. So I started working with attorneys, and I started seeing how they were drafting letters of intent, how they were putting together contracts, and that really intrigued me on how attorneys approach things in the strict sense. From commercial real estate, I went into what's commonly known as mergers and acquisitions, where I was starting to sell businesses and buildings. Now I could always still sell houses because I had that skill set, but I started getting into mergers and acquisitions. And when you deal with mergers and acquisitions, you start dealing with even more attorneys, okay? And you start dealing with contracts, constantly dealing with contracts. So I built up this expertise on how to deal with contracts, right? From the first page to the last page in the strict sense. And that really helped me to understand that when I came into the Moorish movement, the Moors kept talking about contracts. I was like, well, I understand contracts, right? So it was my past skill set of constantly building up and understanding more about contract law, which helped me today to be able to deplete my learning curve faster when I started studying international law, because international law is all about contracts, right? They use this fancy word called treaties. They use a fancy word called resolutions. They use a fancy word called conventions, right? They use a fancy word called international arrangements. But all these words only mean one word: contracts. And if you understand the basic fundamentals of contracts, that means the only thing you have to understand from there is how do you enforce that contract? Well, the first box in contract law was the parties must be known.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, starting off in Gary, Indiana, and then eventually move up the ranks of, working with the federal government, that gave me a lot of knowledge base. See, when you're in the military and then you work for the federal government, it's very streamlined. It's all about systems. It's checkbox, 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 right? It's all about your post orders, right? It's policies and procedures. The government is all about red tape. It's nothing but bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's about red tape. You got to check a bunch of boxes, right? And if you don't check those boxes, chances are you're going to get in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I learned systems from. So when I started taking a look at the Moors, I was like, the Moors don't have systems, right? Systems will outproduce your individual efforts. When you have boxes in place, things that have to get done automatically, it helps to keep things organized, right? And this is why they call it an organized dual society. It's organized. Well, I found out the Moors were absolutely unorganized. They had no systems, no processes, right? They had no procedures. They had no laws. They had no government. They had no head of state, no head of government, no head of the legislative branch, no head of judicial branch. They had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from a background of working with the federal government in the capacity of working in, I worked at the Atlanta Penitentiary for years, for like 10 years. Then I worked at a lower level institution in Denver. And so I did that for about 5 years. And everything I learned by working in the prison system was all about systems, right? So that experience, along with then going in to become an entrepreneur, or should I say self-employed, because real estate agents and brokers are self-employed. Then from there, I became an entrepreneur because I opened up my own mergers and acquisitions company. And I started teaching other brokers. And eventually I started to want to invest my money into other companies, et cetera, to become a full-blown entrepreneur. That way I would have companies working for me instead of me working for the companies as their broker.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
All right.
Anyway, long story short, it's just been fascinating for me to study international law, which is very similar to when I was in mergers and acquisitions, because it's just about contracts and you're dealing with attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's helped me to deplete my curve very quickly to study international law, to study the Moroccan treaties, and to figure out, okay, what's the procedure on how do you enforce these treaties?
Mm-hmm.
See, it's one thing to know about the treaties, but the next question is, okay, how do you enforce it? But that's called procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So my background, my professional background and occupation of working with the government taught me procedure. What was missing all the time? I didn't know the law. I didn't know international law. I didn't know Moroccan law.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing I had to learn. So once I put together the law and the procedure, that's what started to help us move forward much faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So getting into Moroccan, finding out that you said you found out that you were a Moorish American first. Is that right? I heard you say? And then you realized after study that you're Moroccan. Okay. And then you started teaching that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question is, where did you, I mean, because there's been hundreds of other Moorish American leaders out there telling us, that we're Americans, that we're the original Americans, we're the copper colored Americans because it says it in this book, and therefore we should follow the Constitution of the United States of America. And then you come along and tell us the same thing that Noble Drew Ali has said, we're Moroccans, and that being Moroccans, you know, the land and the resources belong to Moroccans. Is that correct? But
100%.
but now, so many of us consider ourselves Black, and not only that, Black and proud. The James Brown song, I'm Black and I'm proud. And so for you to and others to tell us that we're no longer Black, but we're foreigner, like, because Moroccan is foreign to those who would consider themselves Black. It's something they never heard of before. And so it's really hard, I think, to convince, well, I'm gonna just say it, hard to convince Black people that they're no longer Black and they're Moroccans, or they're no longer Americans, but they're Moroccans. That's a hell of a challenge. How do you see yourself going about, or us as Moroccans going about converting Black people and to understand that they're not Black, that they're Moroccans, and that they need to come back to their biological mother being Morocco because they were adopted? That's a challenge. Tell me, how do you see we can overcome that challenge?
Well, the first thing we had to do, we had to have knowledge of self to create a base of Moroccans first, like myself. I'm going to talk about me for a second. First, I had to understand that I'm not Black. Then I had to understand that I was not Moorish American. I had to understand I wasn't Cherokee, and I wasn't a Moorish national. There's no such thing as a Moorish national because Moorish is an adjective. When you look it up, Moorish is an adjective. I'm a Moroccan national. Moroccan is the nationality, okay? So first, we had to come back into knowledge of self to create a base of people that could put together educational platforms. So when you use the word, well, convert Black people, well, no one can be converted.
Okay.
People can be educated.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they can make a choice. They can make a decision on what's best for them and their intentional future. It's all about what do they want for their future. They already know what their past is. They know what their present is. What do they want for the intentional future? And when I'm using the word intentional, I'm underscoring that.
Okay.
If you want an intentional future, something better than what you've had and what you have, and now you want to aspire to have something greater, then first we needed a base of Moroccans to teach Black people, people call themselves Black, to teach Moorish Americans, people call themselves Moorish Americans, to teach people who call themselves Indian, to teach them the truth about their Moroccan heritage. But that starts with a word called education.
Okay.
And this is how you get people to pay attention to what they want for their intentional future. This is why international law calls it self-determination. People have to determine what they want for their future. Is self-determination. And the only way people can choose is they got options.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have options in front of you, then typically you'll go with the status quo.
Right.
Options is what gives people an opportunity to choose. Well, they'll never choose. Black people, Moorish Americans, and Indians will never choose anything regarding Moroccans if Moroccans aren't teaching the people about the Empire of Morocco and the nationality of Moroccan and the benefits that come along with that nationality, the protections that come along with it.
Right. Right.
You see, so it's all about education, good brother, to give the people an opportunity to choose one of the options. Either you're going to remain Black, remain a Moorish American, or you're going to try to be Indian. These are the only three choices. It's either Moroccan, Moorish American, or Indian. That's it.
Okay.
But they never even knew they was Moroccan because people were miseducating all the people.
Right.
But
Right.
now we're teaching them about Moroccan law, and hopefully they'll choose the right decision for their intentional future. That's my response.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. The benefits. We talked a little bit about the benefits, and one thing I came from that discussion was protections, because being a Moorish American or a black man back before I understood that we were Moroccans, um, we would get, or I would get sometimes harassed by the police, and most of the time the contact would come when I'm in my vehicle, and, you know, when they get behind me and those lights start to flash, I know it's going to either cost me money or I'm going to lose my transportation, because sometimes what they say, you riding, without insurance, or you're riding on with a suspended license. That's not all of us, but that's some of us. But I was the part of the group that unfortunately was riding with maybe a suspended license, or the tag is past due. And so what I'm saying is, as a Moroccan, we're under different jurisdiction. So therefore, the United States, when they see tags that are uh, outdated, or you don't have insurance from one of their municipal or their companies, excuse me, um, we would have we can have our own companies, insurance companies. We can have our own regulation of our own tax, and not fear the police or the sheriff coming and taking our property and giving us fines. That is a form of protection that many people can understand. That's just at a basic level, but there's even more protections. I'm thinking the protections of taxes, because although we pay taxes as a Moroccan to our government, with those taxes, we're getting protections. Can you give some examples of other protections that Black people would get when they when they recognize their true nationality as Moroccan and come back to the mother nationality?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And the question is, okay, well, what are the benefits,
Yeah.
right, regarding protections for copper-colored people? Well, the first thing copper-colored people have to understand is it's not what the state can do for them, it's what they can do for the state. You see, we as a people got to understand what's called patriotism.
Yes. Okay.
We got to have love for the state. You got to pledge allegiance to the state, right? And when you pledge allegiance to the state and have love for your country, take care of the state, and the state will take care of you, because the state is only obligated to do for you what you do for the state. See, there is no state without the people.
Right.
When the people come back and they pledge allegiance to the state, then the state turns around and says, okay, what are you going to do for the state? Well, one of the things you can do is be a public servant, sit in one of the offices and protect the state and protect the people, protect the Moroccans, right?
Mm-hmm.
To put them on a shield of protections.
Right.
When you protect the state and you start to get into what's called social reforms to help protect the people, then the people have an obligation to protect the state itself. See, the state can't help you unless you help the state, because the state is an abstract. It's an artificial person.
Right.
So the state is we the people. And we the people take care of each other under patriotism. So there is no benefit without the benefit of the people coming together to have patriotism. We have to love each other, and we have to love the state. And this is the problem. Black people have no patriotism because they don't know who their biological mother is.
Mm.
So they end up having patriotism of a colonist state called the United States of America or Canada or Great Britain, France, Germany, etc. These are Moors scattered all throughout the Empire of Morocco who are pledging allegiance to their adopted mother state.
Mm-hmm.
All the Moors on planet Earth that are commonly referred to as Black people have been adopted by European states and other states all across planet Earth. And we have to learn how to love our mother state. You see this flag right here? This is the mother state flag.
Okay.
This flag one day will be flying at the Olympics.
Okay.
The Black people who call themselves Black, at some point they're going to realize they're Moroccans and they'll be competing at the Olympics and flying this flag. When they win at the Olympics, they'll have this flag, right? They'll clothe themselves. They'll clothe themselves with this flag. They'll brooch themselves with it. They'll put this flag over their shoulders. They'll run around the track with the Empire of Morocco flag.
Right.
That's patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
When you look out for this flag will turn around and look out for you because we're all in this together. We're all for one and one for all. So the benefit comes from us being beneficiaries of the state. But if we don't take care of the state first, then there's nothing to inherit. And if you try to become a beneficiary, that means you got to be a part of a family. Nothing gets passed down unless you're a part of the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a part of the wheel, you got nothing coming. So either you're a part of the wheel of your biological family, or are you a part of the wheel of your adopted family? And if you're the redhead stepchild of your adopted family, then you're going to get crumbs. Right. Because the family that adopted you are not going to give you as much as they're going to give their biological children. So you got to come back to your mother state. This is the mother state flag right here for the Empire of Morocco. This is not the Kingdom of Morocco's flag. This is the Empire of Morocco's flag that Moors designed and created and put on the record with the United Nations in accordance to Article 102 with the Secretariat of the United Nations. The flag has standing in law right now. This flag right here has standing in law.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So until we recognize this flag as our mother, that means the mother can't do nothing for us. Okay. So the benefit will come when we benefit her first. That's my answer.
Okay. I heard you talk about Black people and Moorish Americans being adopted. Okay. First, now listening to this as some person that considers themselves Black or Moorish American say, what is he talking about being adopted? How the hell did he say we're adopted? What does that mean? Because I'm an American and I don't see any paperwork saying that I was adopted. So what's he talking about? Can you explain that to him?
Yeah, you know, the average Black person hasn't even read the Constitution of the United States of America, and the average Black person hasn't read the Constitution of the United States Municipal Corporation. However, anyone who takes the time to read that Constitution of their adopted mother, because the adopted mother's name, her name is United States of America. When you take a look at what's commonly known as the 14th Amendment, so the United States of America has 7 articles and 27 amendments. When Black people take a look at what's commonly known as the 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized. Now you have to take the time to look up the word, what does naturalized mean? Well, when you look in what's commonly known as Black's Law Dictionary, when you look up any Black's Law Dictionary that has terms, it's defined terms, you'll find out the word naturalized means adopted. It's a form of adoption. Anyone that's naturalized has been adopted. So Black people that call themselves Black today, they actually were Moroccans and they got adopted by a family called the United States of America. And the nationality of the United States of America is Americans. So now the people used to be Moroccans, they get adopted by an American family, and now these people call themselves Americans, but that's your adopted mother who gave you that name. She granted you that last name to come under her protections of her house. So Black people have to abide by their adopted mother's rules and regulations. But Black people keep asking themselves, why does this mother treat me so bad? Why does she oppress us? It's because you're an adopted redhead stepchild.
Mm.
So these very people call themselves Black need to understand you get disrespected because the people that sit at the top of the paradigm of the United States of America, they know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that you're the sovereigns of the land. You're the indigenous people of the land. They didn't bring you from Africa. You were already here when they got here. You were Moroccans. So we as a people have to come back together to understand we are Moroccans and enforce our rights through the mother flag. If we don't do that, then we're going to continue to be subjugated people marching and praying.
Okay. So you say we were adopted. I'm gonna play devil's advocate and say I'm a Black man, and where is the literature that says we were adopted? Where's that at? Because
yes,
you know.
So there's two parts to it, if not three.
Okay.
First of all, if you go back and look at the case of Dred Scott of 1856 that was settled by the Supreme Court of the United States of America in 1857, everybody knows about Dred Scott. Dred Scott was not deemed what? A citizen of the United States of America, which means he wasn't American.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was the Civil War that kicked off, and after the Civil War, all of the people who were deemed quote unquote slaves got adopted to be called American citizens according to the United States of America's changes they made to their Constitution. So all these people they call slaves were actually Moors, and Moor is a short title for Moroccans. And the United States turned around on the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. They adopted the Moors. Under the 14th Amendment, it says naturalization, which means adoption. People got to look it up. But then what happened is further legislation was passed called the Naturalization Act of 1870. And with the legislative branch, what they call the Congress, with the House of Representatives and the Senate, passed a legislative act called the Naturalization Act of 1870 and further adopted the Moors to recognize them as citizens of the United States of America. So what I just mentioned to you is called law. So the Constitution is law. Legislation from Congress is law. That's signed into law by the president, that is, because first it starts off as a bill, then it's signed into law by the president of the United States. And then from there, this very important person in history, there's an office called the Sultan of Morocco. A lot of Black people have no clue about this office called Sultan of Morocco. See, when Black people wake up and find out about the office of Sultan, the whole game's over. Mm. Well, long story short, when the 13 colonies wanted to get their liberty, right, away from Great Britain, they said, well, how do we get liberty? Well, we got to declare our independence. So they declared their independence, right, in 1776. But what a lot of people don't realize, the reason why the 13 colonies could declare their independence is because they were already in negotiations with this office called Sultan of Morocco, and the Sultan of Morocco was allowing the 13 colonies to seek refuge or asylum in the Empire of Morocco. The 13 colonies, the United States of America came out of the 13 colonies. So the 13 colonies created a union and became interdependent states, and they created what's called the United States of America to create a national state, an umbrella state that was overseeing the 13 colonies, right, called the United States of America. Well, a lot of people don't know there would be no United States of America if it wasn't for the Sultan of Morocco to recognize the 13 colonies, to recognize themselves as being Americans. There would be no Americans on planet Earth if it wasn't for the Sultan to allow them to call themselves Americans, because they were all British. They were all coming from different European states coming into the 13 colonies, but they were chiefly British, because the British, why do they say the 13 colonies were chiefly British? Because the 13 colonies were being governed by British law. So whatever laws governs the territory, they're going to say that's chiefly British because of the parliament of laws that was governing the 13 colonies.
Okay.
The 13 colonies wanted to separate from Great Britain. The only way they could do that, they had to turn around and get away from one monarch, right, which was the king and queen of Great Britain, and they agreed to come under the protections, the sovereign protections of the Empire of Morocco, of the state, and they agreed to come under the sovereign protections of His Majesty the Sultan. So the Sultan put them under protections. You can find that the evidence of that in the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787 and 1836. You go to Article 6, and Article 6 talks about if these Moors bring American citizens, if Moors capture American citizens, then the Sultan will tell Moors to immediately release the American citizens, which means the Sultan had sovereignty over all these territories. So wherever American citizens were captured, whether they were captured in the land we're standing in, or they were captured anywhere, the Sultan had jurisdiction over that territory. So when you look at Article 6 of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, you'll clearly see that since the United States of America was under the protection of the Sultan, and the Sultan was protecting the American citizens from Great Britain and the Moors. You see?
Wow. Yeah.
So I'm talking law. I'm not talking just fancy history. Oh, let me tell you about the history. No. Law and history goes together. So there would be no United States of America, and there would be no Americans if it wasn't for the Sultan of Morocco. His name was Sidi Muhammad. Sidi Muhammad put them under protections. And they grew from 13 colonies to 50 plus colonies.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You know, we've myself gone through the public school system, and not one day have they ever told me that Morocco or any sultan had anything to do with the history of the United States. They never talked. This treaty you just mentioned, they never mentioned those treaties. They never mentioned that the sultan had anything to do with their becoming a state. And here you're telling me that the United States is only here because of the sultans. Let them be here. Now, is it true that George Washington had written the Sultan and thanked him for his protections in his domain?
Yeah, that's correct. George Washington, right, under the Constitution for the United States of America that was fully ratified and put into full force and effect in the year 1789. George Washington reached out to the Sultan Sidi Muhammad in the year 1789, around December 1st, 1789. But the United States of America as a government, because they were leaving the Articles of Confederation Constitution, they established a second constitution starting around 1787, and they put into full force and effect around June of 1789. But in order for that Constitution, United States of America, to have full force and effect, they had to deposit it with the Sultan of Morocco, or else it would have had no standing in law. You see? So what you have to understand is once the United States of America changed their constitution, their original constitution was tied to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1786 and 1787 under the Articles of Confederation. When George Washington decided to establish a second constitution, they had to deposit that constitution with the Sultan of Morocco, because the Sultan of Morocco oversees all these territories as the true original sovereign. In other words, the 13 colonies replaced the monarch of Great Britain for a monarch called the Sultan. They just traded monarchs, okay? Now, the reason why the United States does not teach their citizens about Sidi Muhammad, the Sultan of Morocco of the empire, is because of one reason and one reason only. See, in order to talk about the Sultan of Morocco, you have to talk about Moors.
Mm-hmm.
See, every time the Sultans wrote a treaty, they always talked about the Moors. So the United States would love to give credit to Sidi Muhammad for what he did to put them under protections and help to defeat Great Britain. Mm-hmm. But in order to talk about Sidi Muhammad, the United States would have to talk about the Moors. And they don't want to talk about the Moors. None of the European states want to talk about the Moors because the Moors are the indigenous people of the land, and the Moors have the sovereign right and the sovereign powers to sit back in their seats of government and govern over their own territories, their own land, which would automatically put the Europeans at best in a subordinate position. So they can't talk about the Sultan because they would invoke this word called Moor.
Okay.
And that's why they don't talk about the Sultan of Morocco. As a matter of fact, the Sultan should have, Sidi Muhammad should have had a statue in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. He should have had a statue before Lincoln, before George Washington. There should have never been a statue there until they put a statue up of Sidi Muhammad. There would be no United States of America without Sidi Muhammad. So the first honor should have went to a Moroccan Sultan. That Mount Rushmore should have been Sidi Muhammad first, then George Washington, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they can't talk about the Sultan because if they do, they have to talk about the Moors. And who are the Moors? These people they call Negroes, Blacks, Colors, African Americans. Who are the Moors? These very people the Europeans have subjugated and got them thinking they never had no history. You see, the Europeans can't talk about the Sultan because you automatically have to invoke the Moors in the same conversation. And the Europeans have been working for at least about 200 or 300 years to suppress the word Moor. Right. The word Moor is the most powerful noun on planet Earth. What's a noun? Person, place, or thing or idea. The word Moor in itself, capital M-O-O-R, is a noun. It's the most powerful noun on planet Earth when you're talking about a people. Because Moors sit in the highest position of government over all these land territories. Or what's commonly known as the Americas, what's commonly known as Europe, what's commonly known as Africa, what's commonly known as Australia, what's commonly known as all the surrounding islands. Moors were running these territories as the sovereign heads of state. And the Europeans don't want to talk about the Sultan because if you do, then you have to talk about the Moors. And the Moors are still here. And the Moors are now rising back up to take their rightful place to sit in their political offices of government as head of state, head of government, speaker of the legislative branch, and judges. It's happening again. You see, it's coming full circle again. That's my answer, good brother, why they don't talk about the Sultan.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. Wow. So we are the secret then of these secret societies. When they say that there are secret societies, because the thing is, we being the Moors, they have to give us, different names if they wanted to maintain their status and their position in the world. Because, like you said, that the word Moor is the most powerful noun in the world, and being Moors, and we know who we are and understand the power of those treaties, we can take our rightful place back in society and in politics, basically. So yeah, I understand what you mean by, Moors being very, very powerful and why they don't want us to know who we are. That's why they give us these so many different names, or we name ourselves. So that then leads into, we have, not being able to identify who we are as Moroccans. And they've had leaders in the past and they have leaders today who know who we are, but yet keep prolonging the idea that we are Black, African American, or something else. That has hurt us in the long run. How do you suppose we deal with these people these so-called leaders who have misguided us? There's been other Moors who talked about this, and I like your opinion. How do we handle, or how do we deal with these leaders who misguided us? That's my question.
Well, that's an excellent question. In law, they're basically referred to as COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program. When you're dealing with COINTELPRO personnel, first of all, everybody's innocent till proven guilty.
Okay.
You see, the only way to stop a sellout, i.e. someone who's working for the FBI or the CIA or someone that's just an Uncle Tom, etc., well, it's one thing to say that, but the question is what can you do about it? Well, first you have to talk law. Well, if you think these people are doing something wrong, then what laws are they breaching? You see, the Moors for decades have been trying to call out these sellouts, this COINTELPRO, but I would ask Black people or ask Moors, where's our laws that talks about propaganda, right? Where's our laws for what's coming known as the RICO Act? All the people know about the RICO for organized crime or organized criminal organizations. You see, the Empire of Morocco will draft laws. And when we draft laws through our House of Representatives, through the matriarchal council of the legislative branch, we'll draft laws that says it is a crime to spew propaganda. It is a crime to be a part of the COINTELPRO on behalf of the FBI. It is a crime to be a part of COINTELPRO of the CIA. It is a crime to go out here and keep teaching people miseducation. You see, the Empire of Morocco, when it drafts laws, now you can say, okay, those people that you're referring to with these allegations, you can say these allegations are based on what? Laws. See, it's the laws that will stop copper-colored people from undermining other copper-colored people. See, it's a dispute. If you have a civil or criminal dispute with someone, what do you have to do? Well, first you have to say, well, they breached my rights or they violated the law. They broke the law. Okay, where's the law? We have been trying to stop these sellouts for decades and we didn't know how to stop them. And the reason why is because we as a people didn't have our own governments. When you have your own government, now you can pass bills into law and list them under civil acts or criminal acts. So when we act these laws and we send cease and desist notices to people and they don't stop, guess what's coming next? Indictment papers. When they get indicted, they'll come in and they'll be read their rights and they'll be told what laws that they breached. And after that, they're entitled to representation. Well, we're going to move forward with the case. They're going to be defendant. They're going to be respondent. This is how you stop it. All that talking and talking, look, that's Mickey Mouse. We got to stop wasting our time. People will act right when they know they're going to end up getting indicted for organized crime or getting indicted because they're out there spewing lies that hurt the people. And that's how we're going to put an end to it. We're going to put the behinds in jail, bottom line.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. I have a question going back to procedure law. Will these individuals who are giving out misinformation, will they have a Moroccan lawyer or a U.S. lawyer? How would that work? I'm just curious. Again, we're going back to procedural law. Can you answer that for me?
Yeah. So if your question is one of if it's a Moroccan and American dispute,
Yeah.
is that your question?
Yeah, because they would be considered Americans to do
Yes,
they haven't made their allegiance and renounced the United States, right?
that's correct. So
Okay.
let's say we're dealing with a sellout or someone who's teaching propaganda, and we have Moroccan laws that says it's a violation that American citizen is teaching propaganda that subjugates copper-colored people one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first thing you have to understand, good brother, is all copper-colored people are listed in the Moroccan treaties as Moorish subjects. That's their proper status in the treaties. They call them Moorish subjects.
Okay.
And according to the Act of Algeciras of 1906, Article 102 gives the Empire of Morocco and its government, along with the Sultan of Morocco, jurisdiction over all Moorish subjects. Who are Moorish subjects? People who have not pledged their allegiance back to the Empire of Morocco.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if you got someone that's a COINTELPRO and they're copper color, they will be defined as being a Moorish subject. And the Empire of Morocco will have jurisdiction over all Moorish subjects who are breaching what? Moroccan law. You see, it's all about laws. So therefore, if we deem them as Moorish subjects, we send them a cease and desist notice. And they say, well, I'm American. You can't, you don't have jurisdiction over me. Yes, we do, because the United States knows that you are a Moorish subject. The United States have signed treaties that says the Sultan has jurisdiction over all Moorish subjects, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Because the biological mother always has original jurisdiction over her children, even if she allowed her children to be adopted by a separate mother, adopted mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? A foster mother, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the United States of America, when she adopted us and turned us into Americans as an example, that's what you call an open adoption. What does open adoption mean? It means the biological mother still has relations with her children. So the treaties left it where the Sultan of Morocco, under Article 102 of the Act of Algeciras of 1906, the Sultan still had jurisdiction over all Moorish subjects. And the proper court to deal with Moorish subjects who still call themselves Americans is consular court. So when we summon them to court, we will list them as a Moorish subject.
Okay.
It makes no difference what their nationality is, where they call themselves Americans, Germans, Canadians, right? Because you got some Moors hiding in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
calling it Canaland.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? They're going to come under the jurisdiction of Empire of Morocco as a Moorish subject. If they're still spewing propaganda and falsehoods, and it's a breach of Moroccan law, then they will receive a cease and desist notice first. They will get a copy of Moroccan law that says you're violating this particular provision of Moroccan law. And if they continue with the propaganda, which is a violation of Moroccan law, then they will be summoned to the consular court as a Moorish subject. Because the Act of Algeciras of 1906, Article 102 gave the Sultan and the consular court jurisdiction over all Moorish subjects, because all Moorish subjects are still under the bloodline of being Moroccans.
Mm-hmm.
Your biological mother will always have jurisdiction over her children, even if she gave her children up to a foster home, commonly known as the United States of America, Canada, Great Britain, Germany, France, Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Italy, etc. Wherever there's more subjects, they will come under the jurisdiction of Empire of Morocco. Now, my hopes is all these more subjects come back home and have patriotism for their mother state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That way we don't have to deal with more subjects out there spewing propaganda and undermining the copper-colored people. But you and I both know that's a wish. A lot of them are going to stay over there with the Europeans and continue to undermine their brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to do it. And guess what? I got no problem with that. Stay over there with the Europeans, but the Europeans know you're listed as a Moorish subject, and that Moorish subject continues to undermine copper-colored people. as a COINTELPRO operative, then they will get indicted, and if found guilty, they will go to jail or go to hell, depending on the severity of the case. That's my answer.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I'm listening to you, and I'm amazed and excited about the Empire of Morocco. It's long overdue, you know, that government comes back into fruition. I'm looking very much forward to seeing the more development of Morocco, the Empire of Morocco. Question: what are your visions of the future of Morocco, the Empire of Morocco, next 20 years?
Ooh, that's a very open-ended question. In 20 years, what I would like to see is not so much as what I see, but what I would like to see is all these people call themselves Black, all the people that call themselves Moorish Americans, all the people that call themselves Indians, all the people that call themselves any nationality on planet Earth. My hopes they start to understand that the Empire of Morocco is their true home. They got to come back home like Dorothy. They got to pledge allegiance to their mother state. I want them to come back and hold office in the government. I want them to understand patriotism. In the next 20 years, it's all about patriotism, love for your mother country. Got to take care of her. If you don't take care of her, she can't take care of you. So the next 20 years, my hope is that everybody starts to read the Constitution for the Empire of Morocco and its 106 articles. My hopes in the next 20 years, people continue to read all of the Moroccan laws that we will continue to ratify. My hopes in the next 20 years, people will start understanding the power and sovereign power and authority of the Empire of Morocco, right, all throughout the lands. I want people to start understanding and respecting what's commonly known as the fez that I got on right here. This fez has been disrespected and disrespected and disrespected some more. This fez has been soiled by people putting jewels all over it, playing Mickey Mouse games, calling themselves potentates instead of calling themselves head of state. It ain't no dang on potentate. You ain't no imperial nothing. You're just an HNIC playing Mickey Mouse games. This fez should be respected right here I got on. Regardless of the color of the fez, it should be respected. And we have subjugated this fez. We're sitting here disrespecting the fez by not understanding this fez represents Morocco. This fez represents Moroccan law. And when you turn around and let people put jewels on it and all that crap, you're playing games with the history of Morocco. You see, in the next 20 years, my hopes is this: that the Moors get their respect back. The Moors have been disrespecting themselves by calling themselves Negro, Black, and colored. Moors have been disrespecting themselves by calling themselves Moorish American, because there's no such thing as Moorish Americans. That is an adjective, just like the word Black. Black's an adjective, Moorish American's an adjective. That's why they don't put the word Moorish American in the dictionary, because the people will find out Moorish American is an adjective. We're not Indians. Indian, that word was created by the British. We're not Indians. So in the next 20 years, I hope that people get educated globally to understand the power of the Moors and the symbolism of this fez, because this fez has been soiled by Moors all over planet Earth. With jewels or without jewels, it's been soiled. And I'm hoping we bring respect back to the fez. That way, when people on planet Earth sees the fez, they say, that's an honorable, noble man or woman. Because women wear fezes too. They wear the white ones, right?
Right.
But when they see the fez should represent liberty and justice for all. the Fed should represent not only a brotherhood and sisterhood, it should represent people who are trying to bring peace back to planet Earth. You see, the treaties gave the Moors a mandate, especially the Act Algeciras of 1906. When you read its 123 articles, it gave a mandate to Moors to bring peace and security back to planet Earth. You see, the word Moor is so important that it put the obligations directly in the hands of Moors to settle disputes on planet Earth. When you read all 123 articles, you will see in the Act Algeciras, especially chapters 1 and 2. The Moors in the treaties with the Europeans agreed that the Moorish government will act as the facilitators, the police on planet Earth. It literally uses the word police in the Act Algeciras. We're supposed to police the planet. The planet. And the planet right now is sick and is out of control because the Moors haven't been doing their job. The Moors think the word Moor is supposed to get you out of some criminal case or supposed to keep you from paying taxes. The foolishness. The word Moor means you're supposed to be a protector of Mother Earth. The word Moor means you're supposed to act as a referee between two disputing states. You're supposed to get in the middle with that fez on and get in the middle of two disputing states, say, hey, break it up, knock it off. That was our responsibility as Moors, to govern, to maintain peace. But unfortunately, the Fez has been soiled. We got to bring honor back to it. So the Fez and this flag, at some point in the next 20 years, I hope it starts to become a symbol of love, truth, peace, and justice. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, I should say.
Okay. I like that answer. You had said that the Moors were supposed to be the protectorate of the earth and prevent wars, keep stability and safety on the planet Earth. Tell me, is that what the United Nations was supposed to be trying to do also? Because soon after, what was that, World War II, the United Nations came about. Before that was the League of Nations. What was their mandate?
Well, that's an excellent question, but you got to take it a step further backwards.
Okay.
The Moors were the sovereigns of planet Earth. However, we got colonized and then we got naturalized.
Okay.
However, the sultans of the Empire of Morocco, the empire, not the Kingdom of Morocco, but the Empire of Morocco, in the year 1906, put the Moorish government back in charge of maintaining peace on earth. It was our direct responsibility. Anybody takes the time to read the Act Algeciras of 1906, they will see it, especially in chapters 1 and 2. Okay? However, when the Act Algeciras of 1906 was signed, they called it the diplomatic body at Tangier. Okay? So the world's superpowers came together to sit at a round table with the Moors and the Sultan. The European state, including the United States of America, was all there at the round table at the diplomatic body at Tangier. Tangier is located in the Kingdom of Morocco at this time, okay? Geographically speaking. So the first United Nations headquarters was at Tangier, Morocco, in 1906.
Okay.
And then what happened is the Sultan of Morocco turned around and signed a treaty with France in 1912 and gave France the power to work side by side with the Moors to bring peace and security on planet Earth. But France decided to subjugate the Moors and not wake the Moors up. But France also petitioned the other European states, and they too did not want to wake up the Moors, to put the Moors back into the Moorish government to govern over the territories. So what happened is when France took over in 1912, because the Sultan signed a bilateral treaty with France, France turned around and ended up with the sovereign pen. They ended up with a pen to have jurisdiction over all the territories all throughout the Empire of Morocco. They called it the French zone. The word French zone was another word right, is like an AKA, right, of the Empire of Morocco, but they wanted to call it the French zone because they had sovereignty over all the lands because the Sultan gave them that power to do so, to act as a representative on behalf of the Sultan of Morocco.
Okay.
So France in the year 1920 established what's called the League of Nations. And it had over 50 plus states on planet Earth that signed on to the League of Nations in 1920 to become the new diplomatic body. So in other words, the Charter of United Nations, the first Charter of United Nations headquarters was in Tangier, Morocco. The second United Nations headquarters was located in France, called the League of Nations. The third rendition of the diplomatic body is called the Charter of United Nations of 1945. So the Charter of United Nations, all those diplomatic bodies came together, 50-something states again, established the Charter of United Nations. They dissolved the covenant of the League of Nations in 1946. So the League of Nations was from 1920 to 1946. They dissolved it because they established the Charter of United Nations in 1945. However, what did all three of these diplomatic bodies have in common? So you have the diplomatic body at Tangier of 1906. Then you have the Covenant of the League of Nations of 1920. Then you have the United Nations Charter of 1945. What did all of these diplomatic bodies have in common? It's the Sultan of Morocco and the Moors, because France granted the powers for the League of Nations to even have powers in the first place as a municipal organization. France also gave the Charter of United Nations its powers because France was overseeing the Empire of Morocco. So France had the power like they was the Sultan. There would be no Charter of United Nations if it wasn't for France granting the powers for the Charter to have powers in the first place as a municipal organization.
Okay.
So where did France get that power from? From the Sultan. Who did the Sultan want to govern planet Earth to maintain peace and security? The Moors, because it's written in the Act out of Serres of 1906. So it was supposed to be the Moors working side by side with the Europeans to maintain peace and security on planet Earth. However, the Moors had the original jurisdiction to reign in the order because of consular court. So if the Europeans did something to violate peace and security, the Moors were supposed to adjudicate the European states. This is what the Europeans agreed to.
Right.
You see?
Right.
So the whole time, the European states and other states on planet Earth, it's not just Europe, it's other states on planet Earth and heads of state, they never want the Moors to rise up because they know that the combination of the Sultan and the Moors working together, that's a very powerful combination. So the United Nations is supposed to provide protections for all national states on planet Earth. Right now, I think the United Nations has 195 member states. Guess who was supposed to be maintaining peace and security on behalf of those 195 member states? It was the Moors. You see, the Charter of the United Nations, just a moment. Oh man, my computer wasn't plugged in. Let me go plug it in real quick. So I'm gonna pause right here, brother. Just hold on for a second, okay? Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, brother. I appreciate your patience. My battery was dying. But it was the Moors' responsibility to maintain peace and security on planet Earth. And the Europeans agreed that it would be the Moorish government to act as the referees of planet Earth. Right now, the United Nations is supposed to act like the referees of planet Earth. You got the General Assembly, and then you got the Security Council. You know who's supposed to be the Security Council? The Moors. Along with the Sultan. You see, that's the Security Council. Who's responsible for security on planet Earth according to the Act out of Serres of 1906, chapters 1 and 2? It was the Moorish government.
Okay.
You see? So France, United States of America, Great Britain, China, and Russia are acting like trustees over the Empire of Morocco and planet Earth on behalf of the Moorish government and the Empire of Morocco. And what was missing the whole time was the Sultan.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we brought the Sultan back as of May 12, 2024, which is the date we elected a new Sultan, Moroccan Sultan, who is a Moor,
Mm-hmm.
and the Sultan took his office on June 8, 2024. He got reinstated.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Abdul Smith Al Kabir. That's the Sultan's name.
Okay.
So the Sultan offers a Sultan, right, along with the Moorish government, because these are what you call offices. The Moorish government number offices, branches, organs of a government, along with the office of Sultan. These are very powerful seats on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So the Moors got to get back and sit at the table with the diplomatic body, which is called the General Assembly of the United Nations and the Security Council. But the Act Algeciras of 1906, Article 123, said the Act Algeciras prevails over any conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this is why they don't want you to know that you're a Moor, because that treaty of the Act Algeciras of 1906, Article 123, says that that treaty supersedes all other treaties. It supersedes all other conventions. It supersedes all other international arrangements of states that were parties to our Moorish treaties.
Okay. Okay.
So in other words, the Act Algeciras is the mother treaty of all treaties. The Act Algeciras of 1906, I'll say it again, brother, I'm being redundant. I like being redundant.
Right.
Is the mother treaty of all treaties according to Article 123 of the Act, which means the Moors are supposed to be sitting at the Security Council. You know what the Moors are also supposed to do along with the Sultan? Since the Sultan is the sovereign over the diplomatic body, then guess who's the only person supposed to have veto powers in the Empire of Morocco? It's the Sultan. Mm. You see why the Europeans don't want to talk about the Sultan?
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, United States of America, Great Britain, France, China, and Russia knows that the office of Sultan is the only sovereign power that's supposed to have veto powers. You know, another reason why I know that they know that? They never put the word veto in the Charter of the United Nations. Mm. The Charter of the United Nations has 111 articles. And none of those articles talk about the veto. You know why I didn't talk about the veto? Because the only person who could have veto in that arrangement was the Sultan.
Okay.
After they drafted the charter, then they came in after that as an addendum and gave themselves, the Security Council gave themselves veto power. But that was what you call an arbitrary veto power amongst those 5 so-called permanent members. They've always known that when the Sultan, the de jure Sultan comes back to the table, he in that office, because it says His Majesty the Sultan, His Majesty the Sultan. When His Majesty the Sultan comes back to the table and sits at the diplomatic body, then they know there's only one person that has veto powers. And all the nations on planet Earth have been trying to figure out, how do we remove the veto power from the Security Council? Well, guess what the answer is? The Sultan. But a lot of states on planet Earth notice that's the answer. Mm. My question to them is this: since you know the Sultan has a de jure veto power and everybody else has de facto powers of veto, then why isn't the several states on planet Earth helping the Moors to rise up to put a Moor back in the office of Sultan? If in fact they know that's the answer to their problems. You see, the reality is this, good brother. In my opinion, The world has spent so much time trying to subjugate the Moors.
Mm-hmm.
They know the Moors are the answer to peace and security, but at the same time, they don't want to give us back what rightfully belongs to us. So at their own expense of the fact that the Permanent Security Council has veto powers that's hurting planet Earth because the blue helmets can't show up and break up fights, right? United Nations military, right, which is a multinational military of people from all nationalities and all states coming together under one blue helmet.
Right.
The United Nations Security Council keeps blocking the opportunity for the blue helmets to show up and break up fights as the referee.
Oh,
but there's a lot of states on planet Earth that knows the power. The Sultan can stop the Permanent Five from having veto powers. You see, the Permanent Five, the Security Council, is acting like trustees in the place of the Sultan.
Right.
Trustees. But trustees can be removed. I'm not saying remove the Permanent Five from their seats. What I'm saying, remove their veto powers. See, the veto must go, and the only person who has powers to do that is the Sultan, and they know it.
Okay. So will the Sultan or the Moroccan government eventually replace the Permanent Five? Or, no.
According to the Act Out of Sarahs, we're supposed to sit at the table with them. This is about friendly relations amongst states. But at any round table, there's a head of that table. The buck must stop with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Someone must have the sovereign power over the other people. Right? That's why it's called a diplomatic body. But at that diplomatic body, there must be a head of state that's over all the other states.
And that's the Sultan.
So no, we will always sit at the table with them. That's the Act Out of Sarah said we sit at the diplomatic body. But at the end of the day, who makes the final decision if, in fact, there's a dispute? Well, that's the Sultan and the Moorish government. That's what's scribed. That's what's written in the Act Out of Sarahs. That's what's written in all the bilateral treaties. If you read any bilateral treaties between the Sultan and Great Britain of 1856, go read the bilateral treaty between the Sultan of Morocco and Great Britain, 1856. Mm-hmm. You'll see all it talks about is the Moorish government, and the Sultan. That's all it talks about. If you read any bilateral treaty, such as the Sultan's treaty with Spain, the Sultan's treaty with France, any treaties the Sultan has signed with the European states, the Moors were always the keepers of the flame.
Okay.
They were always had sovereign jurisdiction over all of these lands. Even in the year 1906, the Sultan and the Europeans agreed to put the Moors back in charge to be the referees. You got to hear what I'm saying. You got to remember now the Berlin Conference, right? Everybody knows about the Berlin Conference that was signed amongst the European states in the year 1884 and 1885, the Berlin Conference.
Yeah, that's when they cut Africa.
Go ahead.
That's when they cut up Africa, right? Divided it.
Yeah, but they was already colonizing Africa. They started colonizing Africa after the year 1492 when the Moors fell in the Iberian Peninsula. Mm-hmm. So they was colonizing Africa in the 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, and 18th century. But what happened is the Europeans was fighting over territories in Africa. They said, now we got to get together and create an organized dual society so we don't fight amongst European states over the natural resources of Africa. Mm-hmm. So they created a diplomatic body called what? Berlin Conference. So they met in Berlin, Germany, mm-hmm. and decided to equally become shareholders of Africa. Mm. Right?
Yes.
But at the same time, think about it. They signed that in 1884, 1885, Berlin Conference. Now do the math. Then they turn around and sign a multilateral treaty called the Act Out of Sarahs in 1906. Mm-hmm. So in about 20 years, from 1885 until 1906. You're looking at about 20, 21 years. They signed a treaty that said put the Moors back in charge of even the European states.
Mm-hmm.
You see, even the Europeans knew that they couldn't get along. They was like, man, who's going to save the Europeans from the Europeans? And the European states knew the only group of people on planet Earth that could reign in the order of Europeans was the Moors. So the Sultan in the year 1906 said, put the Moors back in charge to be the referee to maintain peace and security amongst these belligerent European states.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the Europeans agreed to as well. Think about that. They signed the multilateral treaty of 1906 Act Adversary. They signed it. They agreed. They consented. They ratified, and they promulgated the fact the Moors will be the referees to break up fights amongst the European states. Now, listen to this next part. Then they turn around and didn't wake up the Moors in 1906 to put them back in charge, right? To act as the custodials of over the Europeans. They didn't wake them up in 1906. They didn't wake up the Moors. We are Moors. Copper-colored people are Moors. They didn't wake us up to put us back in the sovereign seat to have jurisdiction over European states. Listen to me. 1906. Then they put France in charge in 1912. Treaty of Fez. Mm-hmm. But France supposed to work side by side with the Moors regardless. That's Article 1 of the Treaty of Fez says the French Republic is supposed to work with a reform Moxon. The Moxon is the Moorish government. Right. So they signed that treaty in 1912, correct?
Correct.
When did World War I begin? 1914. So it really started 1913, but it officially 1914, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't wake up the Moors, and immediately the Europeans did what? Started fighting amongst each other.
Right.
World War I. They're fighting.
Right.
Why? Because they didn't put the Moors back in charge. That's why.
Right.
They signed the Act Adversaries to prevent World War I. Mm-hmm. And even after that, you think they woke up the Moors after they realized they couldn't get it together? That the covenant of the League of Nations still couldn't bring Europeans together to get along? The whole time they knew the Moors were supposed to be the referee, but they didn't want to wake up the Moors. Next thing you know, what happens after World War I? Another war starts. What's it called? World War what? II. Mm-hmm. And even after that, the Cold War, right? Mm-hmm. So between the years 1914 and let's say 1945, you had two major wars, Europeans killing Europeans everywhere. Mm-hmm. And this is the reason why they were supposed to put the Moors back in charge to save these Europeans from the scourge of war that they were having amongst themselves, brother. Mm-hmm. When instead of putting the Moors in charge, they decided just to keep fighting each other.
Right, right. You know, I was thinking about when you were saying that put the Moors in charge, and I'm thinking there hasn't been a book, a movie, or anything that shows the Moors in charge. So we can't visually even see that, understand when the Moors were in charge of the world or a government, to say the least. So I'm thinking we don't see ourselves that way, in charge. You know what I'm saying? Because you were saying that the Moors were supposed to be the ones that were in charge of the world, making sure that there was peace and stability. But I've never seen that. Don't know what that looks like. So this is new to us. Although it did happen, it must have happened in the past. But there's there's nothing that I've read that they put in the books and schools that shows us when the Moors were in control of governments and controlled European governments, controlled the world, basically. I'm thinking in my mind, damn, I've never seen that. And that's important because, see, images are very important. You know, when we see ourselves doing things such as, you know, at a bench as judges or law enforcement, actors, football players. I mean, this is, you can say, okay, I've seen it, we can do it, it's possible. But what you're describing is where Moors are controlling governments around the world, controlling the weapons of mass destruction, settling arguments of other governments, settling disputes. What? Moors? Never seen it. Not saying it never happened. I believe everything that, you know, based on the treaties and things, that there was a time when we were in controlling other governments because we're the sovereigns. I want to see that again. That'd be very, I mean, we could stop a lot of the wars that are that will happen otherwise. You know, that one going over in Israel and with Hamas. That's, you know, an unnecessary war. And a lot of people, civilians are being killed unnecessarily on both sides. Moors could prevent that had the French did what they were supposed to do. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, the French had a huge responsibility to work side by side with the Moors. The question you have to ask yourself, well, why did the Sultan allow France to have the pen to act like a de facto Sultan? Because there was always a Sultan in place, a de jure Sultan, meaning the head of state. But the head of state coming on as the Sultan allowed France to be a representative on behalf of the Sultan, almost like an ambassador of sorts, right? To go out and actually use the pen as if France was the Sultan, right? France could literally sign treaties,
right,
on behalf of the Sultan. But France got drunk off that power. See, France, a lot of people don't know the history of France. France, you know, after the Moors got colonized and ran out of offices in Europe, because it happened there first, France turned around and started controlling Europe for years. The Pope had France as their protector. France was protecting Italy all the way from France, they call the Franks, right? All the way from France, right, in the shore of what they call the Atlantic Ocean, all the way over to Italy. France was controlling all that territory on behalf of the Pope. See, France was the first territory to create what they call the state, a national state, where all the inhabitants, all the subjects, all the clans and tribes within a territory would pay allegiance to the national state. Regardless of what language you spoke, no matter what you call yourself, your tribe, no matter what you call your clan, the mother state was called France. And France was the first in history to create a national state and say everybody within it had to pledge allegiance to the national state. They were getting rid of the monarchy slowly but surely. So the sultans had already been working with France for years, because France was creating what's called an organized dual society, reining in all the clans and the tribes and putting them under one constitution called the nation state, right? The national state. So the Sultan saw France as being kind of a trendy state. And the Sultan said, okay, France, help me to create an organized dual society of the Empire of Morocco. In other words, for lack of a better term, I want people to understand what I'm saying. The Sultan brought in France almost like a business consultant. The Sultan brought in France almost like a trustee to oversee the empire for the Sultan, because France had experience. Right? Got to remember now, France, Napoleon was controlling even Egypt, etc. You know, they say Napoleon blew off the nose of the Sphinx and all that. Man, France was running huge territories. So the Sultan partnered up with France and said, okay, you like to govern things. Okay, I'm gonna help me to govern. Let me compare it to like a company. See, there's a founder, and then there's the CEO.
Right.
The founder establishes the company, and then the founder brings in a CEO to manage the company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you see some people say, I'm the founder and CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two separate titles in a company. See, the Sultan was the founder.
Mm-hmm.
France was the CEO.
Yeah. Okay.
But the way the Sultan wrote the Treaty of Fez of 1912, he gave France too much power. And France turned around and took over the founder, told the founder, sit down and don't say nothing. The CEO took over. It was a coup d'etat.
Right.
France did a coup d'etat against the Empire of Morocco. France is known for coup d'etats. Right now, France is like on their fifth republic. They had Republic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They keep changing over governments. They used to have a king. Now they have a president.
Right.
They just keep changing governments because of coup d'etats. And they did it to the Sultan too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So France was supposed to work with the Moors. That's what the Sultan wanted. But France turned around and partnered up with the Europeans, thinking they could handle it by themselves. And they forgot about the purpose and intent of the Act Algeciras of 1906 was to bring the Moors in to act as referees to break up the disputes of the European states. They're like, we really don't need the Moors. We can figure out how to get along.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They've been fighting to this very day, the year 2024.
Right.
Year 2024, the European states are still fighting each other. All because they didn't want to wake up the Moors and put the Moors back in charge because they spent so many years trying to subjugate us. They just could not stomach the thought of putting the Moors back in the sovereign position to be in the #1 position again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a little bit of history about France.
Right. Right. Again, like I was saying, never seen that before. I think that would be wonderful to see the Moors back in their rightful position in the world, because for way too long, we've been subjugated and been at the bottom and kept there because of certain governments and people didn't want to see us in charge again. Crazy.
Well, let me say this, bro. At some point, the real history is going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
The Europeans should just be honest and tell the world, potentially, I'm going to preface it by saying potentially, what is it that the Moors did to the Europeans? You got to ask yourself, why did the quote unquote white people go out of their way to subjugate these people they call black? What is it about this tug of war, this looks like this battle between this crayon color white and the crayon color black? And it's all other type of crayon colors on planet Earth. That's the crayon color brown, that's the crayon color yellow, that's the crayon color red. But why is the crayon color white and the crayon color black always at odds? Why is this adversarial position? Why is the crayon color white going out of their way to keep their foot on the crayon color black? Well, it's for two reasons, in my opinion. One, because they don't want you to find out who you are, which is the true sovereign. So they got to oppress you and make you feel like you're less than, that you're inferior. That's number one. Number two, at some point, the Europeans need to admit, what did the Moors do to them to make them feel like they had to treat us the way potentially we treated them thousands of years ago? You see, they so busy hiding the Moors' history that they don't want to expose what the Moors did to them that caused them to dislike us so much. So they blame it on slavery. Oh, it's just because we had you as slaves, so we always consider you to be inferior. Nah, there's more to it than that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why they don't want to tell us what we did to them, because in order to tell us what we did to them, thousands of years ago, they would also have to tell us that we were the sovereigns, i.e. the kings, queens, lords, barons, dukes of planet Earth, meaning that we had a history before they had a history.
Yeah.
And they don't want to remind us that we was running the whole planet. The whole planet. So they can't tell us what we did to them because it would expose the whole game that the whole planet, if it's what's called commonly known as an estate, estate, right? An estate belongs to Moors.
Right, right.
They can't expose that history, so they continue to call it racism. No, it ain't racism. It's something that happened in history that they're still kind of upset with us for what we did to them.
Yeah.
At some point, they're going to have to admit it so we can get past it. We got to shake hands and say, you know, let's call a truce. We did something to you, then you did something to us for 400 years. At some point, we got to say, you know, enough.
Mm-hmm.
Enough. Let's get back to friendly relations. It's more than enough earth to share.
Mm-hmm.
That's my answer, bro.
Yeah. Okay. Is it possible that we enslaved them at one time?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
At some point, they're going to admit to us what human right violations we did to them when they was on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come out at some point. They're going to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But in order to tell the truth, that means they got to say that we was in charge.
Yes.
In order to subjugate the people, you got to be in charge, don't you?
Right, right.
They don't want to remind us that we was in charge. They want us to think that we were just born as farm animals ever since 1,000,000 years ago. We were just farm animals of theirs. And that ain't true.
Yeah. But when they keep digging up these grave sites and being archaeologists, they keep finding people in royalty positions that look like us. You know, the kings and queens and so forth and so on are these old civilizations, and they keep finding us. Then they keep looking for themselves, trying to see where they came from. But they're finding us in those chambers and those graves, and that's disappointing for them, because then we're the ones who started civilization, as far as they can say, because they're not there. And that's a problem, because in their textbooks, they're saying we are inferior. There's nothing that African can build hasn't built anything that has benefited society or benefited any culture. And that's completely a lie. But you got so-called scholars today, man, who keep spewing those lies, because they don't want us to know that we were the sovereigns and they had to bow down and obey our rules and our laws. And they don't want to see that again. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Well, look, to your point, the archaeologists, right? Because you're talking the scientists, right?
Right.
The scientists have already proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The archaeologists, the paleontologists, right? They've already proven that our fossils, etc., are way older than everybody else's on planet Earth, right? That we are the first people. This is not a question. It's already settled. The scientists, that's why the government doesn't like scientists, because scientists don't play political games. Right. Scientists like, look, this is the science. The truth is just the truth. But see, scientists work for who? They got to get grants, and because scientists like to be independent, critical thinkers. Mm-hmm. Now they need grants from, people who donate money to them. Oftentimes, the government doesn't want to give them money, right? So people got to donate to them. Right. But then when they find something, because they're always looking for themselves, Europeans are looking for themselves all over planet Earth, they can't find their fossils nowhere. Right. In terms of it being millions of years old, they can't find it. And that's no disrespect to them, but this is why they keep searching everywhere and digging up everything. They're looking for themselves.
Right.
And everywhere they look, they find us. They find bones that fit Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King everywhere they go. So the scientists, sometimes they're not allowed to speak out loud because then they lose their funding.
Right.
The government doesn't like it when the scientists get involved because the scientists are not politicians. Scientists love to explore and tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the government doesn't like scientists.
Right.
So the Moors, it would behoove the Moors to really fund people who like to dig in the dirt. We really need to fund them because that's what's holding the Europeans who want to tell the truth. What's holding them back is funding.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
What's holding them back? They can't release certain columns and books. They can't say it because they lose their funding.
Yeah.
The vast majority of scientists are broke people. They love what they do so much, they live a life of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
We need to fund them, give them the money and the backing so they can be all they can be and come under the protections of the Empire of Morocco. And anybody touch those scientists, they're going to have to deal with the Moors.
Mm-hmm.
Let the scientists do what they do best. They love to dig in the dirt. They love to explore. Let them have at it. And that's the way the truth is going to get out. The scientists are going to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah. 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 We were talking about laws earlier. And the Moors have to make their own laws, and then the government would then issue those laws. But we were saying in another conversation that the Moors cannot make laws that will hinder the human rights of the Americans. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So when you make a law, say, I'm going to just throw one out, no Moorish vehicle can be towed. Okay. That's not hindering their rights, is it?
Whose rights?
The Americans.
Well, it comes down to law.
Okay.
See, the idea, right, must be drafted in a bill. When you bring up a scenario, you say, okay, well, what laws, right, speak to that scenario you just mentioned? So the Moors need to have laws that says if it's a Moorish vehicle, i.e. Moroccan vehicle, then it comes under Moroccan jurisdiction. No, it can't be towed. However, if the Empire of Morocco and the internal Moorish states are working side by side with the Europeans, we must maintain peace and security. So it's about peace first.
Okay.
So the Moors can't go around disturbing the peace. We can't start thinking no one can touch our vehicle because we're Moors. It doesn't work like that. See, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship says both parties have to find a way to cohabitate peacefully. So maybe the Empire of Morocco will allow towing companies to tow Moorish vehicles if the Moorish vehicles are doing something to disturb the peace. If the Moors want to park all crazy on the street and pull up in the grass and just do what they want to do and be a belligerent, that's not going to happen. We're going to maintain the peace in Morocco. The Moors will be governed. And when they Moors violate Moroccan law, they too will be indicted. They too will pay traffic tickets. Moors will pay tickets. So at some point we will sign compacts, right? They call it compacts. We will sign compacts with the United States. We'll sign compacts with Canada. We'll sign compacts with the European states because the European states are in Morocco. So we have to find a way to sign compacts that says, how can we start to reign in the order between Moroccans and other nationalities that are cohabitating in Morocco? So yes, at some point we're going to have laws that says what the Moors can and cannot do, and they violate those laws, And one of those laws might say, yes, that towing company can tow your vehicle for you acting a fool and parking all crazy. That's my answer, brother.
Okay. So we need to get busy writing bills because like you were saying, Morris, where's your law? If you don't have laws, you can't enforce them. So we need to start writing bills to turn them into laws that will protect the interests of the Moroccans. Okay. Again, I'm trying to
and deal with foreign policy. Foreign policy deals with compacts between two foreign states.
Okay.
And that's what we'll do. We'll sign agreements. We will. That says what a municipal police officer can do or not do regarding a Moroccan vehicle. Because we got to maintain peace.
Yeah.
The Moors can't turn into belligerents. There can be no anarchy amongst Moors. Moors will be governed. And the Empire of Morocco has to find a way to sign compacts with the Europeans to say what they can and cannot do regarding your example of a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But they will be signed, and the Moors will adhere to those social compacts, or their car will get towed if they violate that agreement.
Okay. I understand it's important to keep the peace, and that means, making agreements and holding up to those agreements. But the point I think I was making is making laws to protect the interests of the Moors and not, at the same time, I'm trying to figure out the word, is not offend the human rights of the Americans, because that's what's important, right? And then what's offending the human rights? Is there a strict things or list that says these are violations of human rights? There is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so in that first scenario, um, I'm trying to figure out parking a vehicle, say on private property of a bank, getting your vehicle towed. This is just a very arbitrary scenario that I'm trying to get an understanding of, violating their rights and not being able to say, well, I'm gonna tow this car because you're violating the rights of the bank or the private property owner, even though the vehicle is just sitting there. This is just hypothetical, but it's to get a basic understanding of violation of rights. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, the thing we should all remember is this: treat people the way you want to be treated. It's not necessarily about human rights, it's about common sense.
Okay.
The Moors must write common sense reforms, i.e., bills, laws, policies, regulations, ordinances.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about respecting our neighbors. You must always remember that the Sultan of Morocco allowed the Europeans to remain in the Empire of Morocco. You must always remember that the Sultan of Morocco put the Europeans under his protections, especially the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans actually come under the protections of the Sultan. That's Article 6 of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship.
Right.
So when you start talking about human rights violations, it's the Moors' obligations not to violate anyone's human rights. We're supposed to be the ones who are at higher self.
Right.
We're supposed to maintain a higher standard. We're supposed to be the example of planet Earth. How can you expect others to conduct themselves in a certain way of standards if we're not maintaining the standards? So in my opinion, Moors will not be violating people's human rights because we're going to try to maintain the highest standards of human rights. That's my answer.
Okay. Yeah. I understand what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a good answer. Okay. Wow.
But the problem is this, good brother. These people call themselves Black, people call themselves Moorish American. They have so much hate in their hearts.
Yeah.
Because they oppress people. You would let go of the hate if you understood patriotism to your state. You would let go of the hate if you understood patriotism to your state. See, they got to get distracted with a true purpose and intent in life. It's to love the state. And when you love the state and you love your brethren, which is your fellow Moroccans, and then you understand your true legacy on planet Earth, why is it that we are Moors? It's because we are the keepers of the flame. We're the ones supposed to maintain peace and security on planet Earth. See, when you start trying to tell people to act accordingly, to maintain peace, that means you got to be peaceful yourself.
Right.
How can you force people to be peaceful if you're not peaceful? Which means people got to let go of the hate.
Okay.
We got to move forward. We got to get out of this game banging mentality. We got to stop game banging with this black and white thing. It's got to stop. So we will stop the hate when we understand that we got to be in patriotism status of our own state. People need a new agenda in life. Right now, our biggest agenda is how we going to survive in the white man's world. Well, guess what? The white man is actually living in the world of the Moors.
Right.
You'll let go of the hate once you realize your responsibility to the state. You'll be too busy trying to help your state. And your state has an obligation to help other states. Our job was to uplift planet Earth, not just Moors.
Right, right, right.
That's our job. We're referees. If you don't remember nothing else, Moors are referees. And referees have an obligation to understand the law. That's what referees do. They know the rules, the regulations,
right.
Which means they got to hold themselves in that same standard. So you can never regulate if you got hate in your heart. You got to let it go. We got to move on. The future generations need the planet to come back together. And only the Moors can control that narrative moving forward with love instead of hate.
Right.
That's my answer.
Okay. I really liked your answer. I really liked the way we conducted this interview, and I hope that I'm able to bring you back very soon to continue our discussion. Where I'm at today, they're getting ready to close up shop, and so I'm gonna have to get out of here. But I enjoyed it, and I hope that in the future we can continue this conversation. And I look forward to it.
Same here, good brother. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Peace and love.
All right, brother. All right, peace.
All right.